it's one of the biggest moments in Wall Street history. SpaceX has officially begun trading, soaring more than 20% above its IPO price and helping push Elon Musk past the $1 trillion net worth for the first time ever. The blockbuster debut values SpaceX at nearly $1.8 trillion, could open the door for a major wave of tech and AI companies to go public as well. And joining us now to break it all down, a historic IPO for SpaceX, is University of Minnesota Carlson School professor Richard Thakor joining us now. Professor Thakor, we appreciate you taking the time. Thank you so much for being with us here today on All Day.
No, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Just wanted to, let's start with what happened today with SpaceX. I mean, for people who are not involved maybe in the market or don't really understand what has happened today, walk us through exactly what this means for SpaceX, how and where we are after today.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's certainly a historic day in terms of financial markets. So SpaceX did an initial public offering today, or in other words, an IPO. Now, to take a step back, what an IPO is when we start a company, so whenever a company is first started, it's called a privately held company. So it may be owned by just one person, such as the person that founded it, or a handful of people. Now, when a company gets large enough and then it wants to gain more financing from other sources and expand even more, it may make the decision to become publicly traded, which means that it's selling shares of its stock, in other words, ownership shares, to the general public and to any investor that may want to buy it. So that's what SpaceX has done today. So they've done an IPO. They sold their shares for the first time in the marketplace, in the general stock market. Now, they started selling their shares for $135 per share in the market for people that had kind of bought into the allocation. And since then, as you mentioned, the shares have gone up tremendously. So they've gone up by about 20% so far today from that initial $135 price that it started from. And SpaceX has hauled in about $75 billion in terms of capital from selling its stock for the first time, which is the largest amount by far that we've ever seen out of any company.
Yeah, obviously Elon Musk has a track record. I mean, you look at Tesla, and he has a long track record of building these companies and seeing them turn into large successes. Where do we see, SpaceX in terms, like you just said, $75 billion was raised in contribution. I mean, what does the future of SpaceX look like for you from what you've read and what you've come to understand of this company?
Yeah, that's a good question. And really, the value going forward will depend on the future and what it does with its investments. And it's hard to say. I think one difficulty here, and there are a lot of people that question SpaceX's worth. I think the estimate is over $2 trillion right now based on its current market price. And some people question that valuation based on the numbers. And I think part of the complication is that buying into SpaceX is buying into what we call optionality, which is that there are many different types of investments SpaceX is making in AI infrastructure, Starlink satellites, rocket ships, and so on and so forth. But a lot of these investments may piggyback off each other and open up windows or doors into new types of investments that people can't quite even imagine right now. And so I think that we've seen this in many other companies, that there may be companies that haven't even made a profit yet, but investors are still very interested in the company and want to buy into it because the upside potentially is so large for the company. I think that's potentially what we're seeing in SpaceX.
This may sound like a silly question, but in terms of this evaluation, because like we said, it started at $1.8 trillion. That is a remarkable evaluation for a company, any company that goes public. How much of that is tied to Musk's name and his track record, like we were just talking about a moment ago? How much of it being it's him and his innovation and his ideas of what humanity could look like in the future is attached to that trust of investing that type of money into this company?
Well, that's a very good question. I think it's hard to say exactly how much, but I would suspect a large portion of that valuation is based on Elon Musk himself as CEO. What we've seen in the academic literature is that CEOs are very important to companies. They guide the strategy of companies, and Musk is a very unique CEO in terms of his vision going forward and how he views things within the company and strategy and so on and so forth. So I think a lot of the excitement is certainly tied to Elon Musk's own strategy with the company. And I think part of what underscores that is that Musk still owns the vast majority of SpaceX. He is by far the largest owner. He controls the company. And so buying into SpaceX is really an understanding that you're buying into Musk's own strategy for the company going forward.
I don't want to get too deep in the weeds, and by no means for anybody watching, nobody here is going to tell you to buy or sell anything at any point for any company. But how much do you perhaps caution people about maybe getting in? It's a new and exciting company. It's got a huge valuation. How much do you caution people on maybe getting in on something early before a dip might occur? What type, does anything come to mind in terms of previous companies that you've noticed where there's a lot of excitement that it starts out well, but then it might dip a little bit in the future?
Yeah, we've certainly seen this many times before in the past. And so the short answer is that the future is uncertain. So we don't know what will happen at SpaceX. And buying into any stock is risky. It may go up and it may go down in the future. And so I think you're absolutely right that a lot of times when we see this first day of trading where SpaceX right off the bat in one day has gone up 20%, it's very tempting for people to want to go in and say, hey, that will continue in the future. And the short answer is that it probably will not. We probably will not see 20% increases day over day. The IPO day is often a very specific thing that happens to stocks. The future is uncertain. So SpaceX might grow tremendously. There are many skeptics that say that it's overvalued and it might go down in value as well.
Professor Thakor, before you came on, we were talking about this very topic, and I said, I think it's a tremendous accomplishment. I know when people might read the headline, world's first trillionaire, there's a lot of people out there that might have mixed opinions and feelings on that. It feels like, we were saying, I don't necessarily believe that money has to be the first indicator of success, but being the world's first trillionaire, I mean, that is a monumental achievement for an individual. What are your thoughts on that? And Elon Musk now becoming the world's first trillionaire?
Well, it certainly is a monumental achievement, and I think that it's been driven what we've seen by his success with the companies that he's been running. And I think this ties into your previous question that a lot of people buying into these companies because he is at the helm and he has a specific vision for these companies. And so far it's obviously paid off very well for him since that he's a trillionaire and now SpaceX is worth over $2 trillion. But of course, the future remains to be seen whether a lot of the bets and the strategy that he has in mind for the company will actually pay off in the end.
It's certainly going to be a fascinating process to see it all play out, but so far so good for SpaceX right out of the gate. Professor Thakor, we certainly appreciate you taking the time and giving us your insight. Thank you so much for joining us here on Fox 9 All Day. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me on.